Not you're saying things Jesus would say, not even you're feeling things Jesus would feel. So that's great. Let's feel and say. But when you're doing what Jesus would do, then you get to be called a little Christ.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm so excited to bring you today's featured conversation with Brian Tome. In my conversation with Brian today, we talk about adventure as a spiritual discipline, about what it means to get uncomfortable and how that creates space for life change and the Holy Spirit. We also talk about meaningful friendships, particularly for guys, because we all know it can be sometimes a little difficult for guys to connect, or at least different than it is than our female counterparts. I love this little quick and meaningful conversation I get to have with Brian. I think you will too. Also, don't forget, we're still in January, which means that we're still running our contest for some book giveaways. That's right. Everybody who signs up on our email list between now and the end of January 2020 is entered to win one of the books of the authors who have been on the podcast. In 2020, we've got some incredible authors, guys like Justin McRoberts from our last episode, Brian Tome, Josh Gagnon, and we are giving away some of their books. Charles Causey, one of my mentors, coming up in 2020. I know that you're going to love these books. So the way to enter, sign up at twmilt.com, twmilt.com. Also, anywhere you listen to this podcast, it'd be super helpful if you could leave a rating or review. Helps other people find it. Without further ado, here's my conversation with the lead pastor of Crossroads Church, Brian Tome. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm excited and honored to have Brian Tome on the podcast today. Brian, how are you?
I am great. Utterly great, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I really appreciate it. And one of the things that I've noticed in the ministry that you're doing at Crossroads and really throughout the United States is this idea of experiential encounters with God. Where did that kind of resonate in your heart, and how did that kind of grow into an idea that seems to be gaining popularity every time I see it?
Well, what do you mean by experiential encounters?
Man Camp and what you're doing with Phantom Lake and some of the things that are out there that just kind of like really calling people to do something different and not just read or observe.
Right. Great question. There's a few different things going on there, Tony. One is, when we look at the scriptures, the things that are recorded, the things that move us are all experiences. If we try to geek out over what exactly was going on with why the golden lampstands in the temple and why the priest had the breastplate they had on and why the pomegranate, I don't know. But what we do know is it was an experience. It was a spectacle for people to go and encounter worship. All the smells, all the bells, all that stuff. Miracles recorded in the Bible. Jesus' ministry grew because people were experiencing something beyond just his teaching. His teaching was an on-ramp, or rather his experiences and the miracles were an on-ramp to his teaching in many situations. So in ministry, if all we're doing is giving people mental new ideas or new fodder, things that make you go, a new twist on a Bible verse, something like that.
Right.
You're not going to undergo spiritual transformations. That's one element of it. The other element of it is there's an old book, business principle from about 20 years ago. I don't know if you're old enough to know this because you look like you're younger than I am. We look at each other on Skype.
Yeah, I'm 39.
How old are you?
39.
All right, you're younger than me. Do you remember the whole phrase, red ocean, blue ocean?
I don't.
Okay, so it was a big business term that came in a book, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, something like that. And the premise was this, is, if you want to go and you want to hunt for a shark, you take your boat out in the ocean, you chum up the water, you put some blood out there, the shark smells it, and the sharks come, and that's what you do. And that's where all the fishing boats are, the red water. And you could be led to, as the theory goes in business, you can be thinking, oh, this is where everybody is. I need to do this. But the ones who really make it big, who make a lot of money, realize that there's way more sharks in the blue ocean than there is right here in the red ocean. And so if you can figure out a way to draw in sharks different ways and go to different places, huge opportunities there. So when I look at the kingdom of God, the red ocean where everybody is weekend services. Everyone is there. When Crossroads started in 96, there was very few people doing what we were doing. Very, very, very few. I might say we were the only ones with some of the nuances we had, of not wearing a suit jacket, having avant-garde humor, playing video clips, creating our own videos, just just a bunch of stuff, right? Well, there's hundreds of churches that do that now, all over the country. And in fact, people leave Crossroads and go to other churches all the time. That stuff just isn't that special. No, it's still red ocean. I mean, there's a lot of people there, and I still want to use those old methods, bringing people together for worship and scriptural teaching and having to be winsome, all that stuff. But personally for me, the masses are not in our buildings. The masses are out there in the ocean someplace else. And so we've got to get more people in the kingdom of God who are thinking of things beyond the next cool sermon series I can do, and what's the next worship song I can do that's going to get 1 million streams on YouTube. Hey, newsflash. People who are going to be reached through worship music are already being reached through worship music. Right. So I love it. Right. Hey, newsflash. If you're starting a church and you think you're reaching the unchurched, the first weekend, 50% of everybody's going, hands are up. Newsflash, you're not reaching anybody. You're getting people who are in the red ocean or coming from other churches, and maybe they need to be at your church. But let's be serious. You're not doing the Great Commission. You're just getting people with the normal chum in the water. So we've got to have experiences and people and real apostles going places and doing things that other people aren't doing. So you mentioned a couple of them. The stuff we do with camps and whatever I've talked enough. So a bunch of stuff like that.
I do. I love it. I think it's so important. And one of the themes that I see is I was kind of like looking at what you're doing is this idea of adventurous. What does adventure do as a spiritual discipline, or is it even safe to call it that?
I think it's safe to call it that as long as we amend it a lot. Adventure does not have to be camping. Adventure does not have to be motorcycles. Adventure does not have to be skydiving. Adventure is physically getting to a place where you're uncomfortable. And when things go wrong, that's when it's really an adventure. You can be driving to your grandmother's house in a snowstorm, but once you get a flat tire and you got to change it in the middle of the adventure, right? So I'm a big fan of adventure because adventure is a simulation for spiritual formation. We get spiritually formed when things go wrong. Unto you, it has been granted to suffer according to his name. There is just a thing that happens when things go wrong. And so I believe if you can learn in a environment like camping or hiking or whatever your brand of adventure is, to enjoy that and deal with things going wrong, deal with things being uncomfortable, I think you're going to be more steeled to deal with the spiritual formation that God's going to do in you, which happens when things go wrong. Like, I don't know about you, Tony. I just grow more spiritually when I'm any place other than on a beach reading a book.
Right.
I love being on the beach reading the book. There is something there. I can read a book about Christ. That's okay. But boy, you can't take that for very long. But man, you can really be formed when you're in a place where God is pressing you and conforming you.
Let me ask about that pressing for just a minute, because I think that for a lot of people, when they're pressed, when they're up against opposition, which may be adventurous and maybe planned or unplanned, there's one of two ways that people can go. They can go closer to Christ, or in some ways they can go away from Christ. When I was in the Army, and one of the things that we noticed is on the way back from deployment, a lot of our soldiers were so burnt from all of the, I'm going to use air quotes, adventure, but from all the trauma, really, that they couldn't lean into God. They didn't feel like they could lean into God anymore. How do we, as leaders and as ministers, how do we make sure that people, when they come to that crisis moment or that adventurous moment, lean into their faith versus stepping away?
Well, yeah, I think PTSD happens when there's nonstop adventure, nonstop high adrenaline moments, nonstop I'm in an uncomfortable situation and I can't get out of it. The kind of adventures I'm talking about is there is brief moments of
Mm.
high stress, brief moments of discomfort. And then you're sitting around a campfire a few hours later, you're laughing about it and you're saying, I can't believe what we did today.
Yeah, I mean, you guys process it, right?
Right, right. So at our camps, we have man camp, woman camp, couples camp, vet camp, father-son camp, mother-daughter camp. We've got a bunch of different. That's the key element of them is the campfire times at night after people have pooped in the woods, after people have cleared brush, after people have had arm wrestling competitions, whatever they have happen. There's a safe place around the campfire to have a glass of wine or a bourbon or a Coke or a hot chocolate or whatever it is, and to say, what did I learn today? And process it while you're staring into a fire with some safe people. That's all that stuff is really at its core preparation for the conversation and the formation around the campfire.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's just good old fashioned disciple making, life on life
Right.
kind of stuff, and taking it out of the normal context. When as you started to dream and God kind of gave you this vision for the different camps and the experiences, was this formed out of your own walk? I mean, were you formed by an experience that drastically changed the way that you saw God, or impacted it in such a way that you're like, yeah, we need more of this?
Yeah, no question. I think it started for me, Tony, when I was, what was the year? I'm just going to, about 2001, 2002. I was in a men's group and a guy in the men's group said, hey, I ride motorcycles and maybe we should take our wives, go out to Vegas and rent Harleys and hang with our wives and bond for like 3 or 4 days.
Hmm.
I thought that was the most stupid, unredeemable waste of money I'd ever heard. Because I was all in on building the church and doing everything that was kingdom focused, right? And we went out there and ran but I thought, well, this is discipleship. I'm discipling these guys, so I'm just going to go along for that. Well, we got out, and I think it was on day 2. We were riding by the Grand Canyon, and it just dawned. My wife was sitting beside me, and it just dawned on me. I hadn't thought about Crossroads for 2 days.
Wow.
I hadn't thought about it at all, and I felt, I felt rejuvenated. I felt light. I felt bonded with these people. We laughed in the hotel parking lot because we were staying in hotels that day. It was it was a Harley thing, and it was really, really profound for me. And that made me think, all right, I need to be getting in environments that are outside the norm. That's really what an adventure is. It's an outside the norm environment. And from that just started to build, and I started to tack on and add to different experiences, have a different type of motorcycle experience, or other things. And we're just worn out. We're worn out, Tony. We're worn out and just beat down. The average American is exhausted. The average American is utterly lonely. And the people in our churches are the average American. And so I believe that whatever the most important work God's doing you, if you're in ministry, actually you're not in ministry, the most important work God is doing is the work in you. That's the most important work. The most important work of God is the work He's doing in you. In fact, I think sometimes that God had me start Crossroads just so He could squeeze me and work on me. Like He had me start Crossroads. This is the only way He could use me, or the only way He could form me spiritually. Then when we add to it that if He has made us shepherds of a specific flock, shepherds are effective in as much as they know where the grass and the water are for the sheep. If the shepherd can't get the sheep to grass and water, he's a very ineffective shepherd. And so I always pay attention to what grass and water is God leading me to, because the grass and water He's leading me to is likely where He wants to lead His sheep. And so when God starts working me, normally it's to lead other people there as well. So I've been a big adventure guy, big get off the grid guy, big get disconnected and unplugged guy, because I've seen it have spiritual benefits for myself.
Now, as somebody who's managing a pretty big movement in your life, how do you set rhythms? Because I hear a lot of times from leaders in and out of the church that they don't have time, like, oh, I'll never use all my vacation, some of those kind of statements that used to be almost prideful statements. How do you, as a leader of a large movement, manage to set rhythms in your life for rest and adventure and rejuvenation?
Well, if you're going to lead a movement, it's got to be about more than you. You've got to be able to develop people under you and around you so that you can take more and more time off. And the larger the thing gets, the more time off you need. At least that's what I found.
Mm.
And I tell folks who are on staff that I've never been in a meeting where any senior leader said, "Hey, we need to really promote so and so because they work so hard they don't even take up all their vacation days." No one has ever gotten brownie points for not taking up their vacation days.
Right.
It's never, ever, ever, ever happened. It's critical for us to have those forced seasons of rest. I have a friend of mine who used to run a lab, a neuroscience lab at the National Institute of Health for the government. And he said that he found that the people who were at the bench the longest, the people who put the longest hours in research in the lab, had the fewest amount of breakthroughs. And his hypothesis was, once you get past a certain number of time on the job doing the same kind of task, you're not going to have creative breakthroughs. In his vernacular, we need to shut down the circuits. I mean, as our mind is boiling and the synaptic connections are going, we need, like, when we go to a beach vacation, we go camping, it just shuts down the circuits. Our chemicals don't boil the same way they were. Don't go in the same ruts. And then we fire them back up. We might find new connections and new creativity. So maybe this is why God mandated, one day at 7 as a minimum. Maybe this is why he had all those festivals mandated. He knew that we needed festivals and different things to do. So you're not impressing God, and you're definitely not going to impress anybody, because your lack of recreation, or of course we know is recreation, your lack of rest, is going to lead to you just being average and being normal.
That's a great perspective, and I think one that people often miss. I've heard you say that that friendship for men is one of the most important spiritual disciplines that we can grow. And I wonder, for the guy that's listening right now who maybe feels really alone, how would you tell them or recommend to them to get started on that path to real meaningful friendships?
I would say notice for a man, notice what it is that you like to do and go do that, and be on the lookout of when you're at that place. Who is it that you like? Men are not going to, in the old school days, you'd have all these men's accountability groups, and guys would get together and look and go, "Hey, did you jack off this week?" "Yeah, I did." "You?" "I did." "Okay, well, I need to be more like you." It's just like sitting around and talking about not
Right.
masturbating. And that kind of fizzles out, because no one wants to show up to just say, "Hey, did we adhere to the rules today?" Those conversations are important. Sexual purity is very, very important. But having relationships that are formed around, are you sexually poor? Are you sexually poor? Sexually pure is going to not last long. But if you say, "I like to bowl. I'm going to join a bowling league," and you see other dudes that are bowling there, you're going to probably start a conversation with them at some point, and you're going to become friends. If you're into motorcycles, you run other people who have motorcycles, you're going to become friends. So I tell guys, do something you like to do and look for people who can be friends inside of that, because guys bond really well when we're doing something together, but it's got to be something we both like.
Yeah, for me, water skiing. I could water ski all day long. It's my absolute favorite thing to do, and I found some guys who love to do it early in the morning. It's the best when the water's glass. It's incredible.
Yeah, and you probably get together for reasons other than water skiing too, right?
Well, right. During the off season, we get together and have breakfast so that we can talk about water skiing.
Yeah, right. Did you see the latest ski that just came out?
Right.
What do you think about that new robe? Yeah, right.
That's right.
It's conversation, and what do you know? Someone sneaks in there, you talk about, "Yeah, man, this is a conversation I just had with my wife where we're stressed out about money because of all these things, and oh, really? What's going on with you and your wife? Yeah, it leads to that. But we've got to I have the exact same things with guys who overland or do motorcycles. Exact.
Now, one of the things I've noticed is I follow you on Instagram, and you use that platform incredibly well. So kudos to you. I love your Q&A days. I'm curious, how do those days where you sit there and you'll answer dozens of questions, how does that impact you as a medium? How has social media from that perspective influenced you?
You mean influence me as far as how I'm using social media, or
Your connection to the flock that way, to use the church term, or just
a lot.
I would just say that, like, man, people are putting a lot of real stuff out there, and that's just, as somebody who I wonder often, like, oh, how would I answer that question? And you do a great job. I just curious what that does to you personally.
I think you have to know. Tony, I'm late to the game on this. I really am. We have some people in our church who were just early foundation leaders in social media and blogging and all that stuff. And I used to call them bloozers, because if you're blogging, you're a loser and all that stuff. And people were trying to get me to do podcasts. I was like, no, I don't need. I've got a stage to preach from. I got that. I don't need to do all that stuff. And I was woefully wrong. I was wrong. So in the last year, I've been trying to make up for lost time. And one of the things that I've done, and I think we as pastors have to do, is you have to say to yourself, what is it you want to do with your social media platform? What is it that you want? And I think there's a number of different things for that. My situation, what I want two things. I want a connection point for people who are already in our church. And two, I want to reach people who aren't being reached by other social media accounts all across the country. That's what I do. We did an interesting, we hired someone to do an analysis of who follows me on social media. And there was the top 20 people. If we looked at who has people in common with me, like my followers follow who else?
Sure.
Number one person in common was Ellen DeGeneres.
Wow.
Number two was Jimmy Fallon.
Huh.
The only pastor in that top 20 was Rick Warren at number 19 or 18 or something like that.
No kidding.
That's the only one. And I was like, wow, I wasn't trying for that, but that's actually in my heart. If you take a look at these guys who've got, 100,000, 300,000 followers, a lot of those guys, they have churches of 1,000. They got 300,000 followers. What's going on there? Well, first of all, it's good for them. If that's what God wants them to do and that's what they're going for, great. But what's happening is those guys, they're all sharing each other's followers. They're not reaching anybody new. Listen to Hillsong, listen to Bethel. Okay, that's great. We want different flavors for that day. But I want to be about reaching new people through social media. So my posts aren't just inspirational Bible verses with a cool font. My posts aren't just, a 20-second winsome rant of what I just did this last weekend. There's sometimes that, but they're grittier than that. They're trying to be more encouraging. They're just trying to give people something they wouldn't expect from a pastor. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying it's what you need to do, but you can't just say, I'm going to need to spend more time on social media. Why? What is it you want? What is the thing you're trying to go? Who is it you're trying to serve? And then have things operate with that. The questions are big. I mean, when we do the questions, when I do those, it's dozens on those days when I do it, dozens, because when I do those questions, I'm not trying to serve the theological egghead who wants a thorough theological response to their question. There's a place for a thorough theological response for a question. Sure. It's not in whatever 100 characters or whatever it is on the screen of an Instagram post. I'm trying to reach someone who says, can you really be like coherent and have fun and follow God at the same time? That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm not giving ironclad arguments as to why things are. this is just how one man processes this, and it's effective for that.
Well, and I love the like you said, the grit. I was thinking to myself, if I was going to describe it, it's like a snarky theologian. Like you're just not going to have the debate with the guy who wants to have the debate. You're just here to say, hey, this is my opinion. If you don't like it, go follow somebody else. I don't care.
Right.
I think there's a beauty to that, and I think the way that you approach communication is really good for that, and that does bring me to your latest book, Move, which is a men's devotional, 66 different devotionals. So why is this the right time for a devotional like this for men?
Well, there's not many devotionals for men, and the ones that are sort of a female format, except it's for men.
Right.
So when I say
it's so true. It's so frustrating.
Yeah. So when I say a female format, I'm not just talking about the cover with clouds on it or something like that. Women like to talk. They like to go out to lunch and just be with one another. That's great. That's very godly. That's wonderful. Guys really don't want to go out to lunch and just be with one another unless there's a point. What's the point we're trying to do? For the most part, we need to know, are we doing something together? Are we moving? You mentioned the water skiing. Great, we're together, but like we're doing something together. We're water skiing together, or we're going to serve the poor together or something. Jesus didn't come for us to have the right thoughts. Many devotionals are written. So here's a new thought you haven't had. Think about that one. Here, if you ever thought about this angle, if you ever thought about that angle. This is why, by the way, churches are 70% made up of women, because most preaching is that way. Let me give you something you haven't thought of, an angle you haven't thought of that way before. Most men are much more action-oriented, many women as well. So I wanted to do a devotional that would have scriptural truth, and there are a lot of angles in there that people haven't thought of before. A lot of angles. I go on a couple of them you want me to, but the point of the angles I give people in the scriptures is, so today you move, you do something different. Becoming like Christ means you are doing things Jesus would do. Not you're saying things Jesus would say, not even you're feeling things Jesus would feel. So that's great. Let's feel and say, but when you're doing what Jesus would do, then you get to be called a little Christ. That's what a Christian was. Then you're a little Christ. You're actually acting like him. You're moving like him. So that's the heart behind the book.
I love it. And I strongly think that we need to market more towards men. I love the way you communicate that. I know you're on a limited time crunch. I'm super thankful for the time that you've given me today. Where can people go if they want to follow you? BrianTome.com, right?
Yep. BrianTome.com, or social media platforms at Brian Tome. Instagram.
Yeah, I'm telling you got to follow him on Instagram. The Q&A days are some of my favorite days. It sucks up a little bit more time than it should in my life, but it's okay. So the last question I always love to ask people, if you could go back to Brian, young Pastor Brian, entering beginning Crossroads, and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, can I try to do two instead?
Yeah.
I would say, don't be so stressed about money. It'll work out. It'll be okay. And I mean that church-wise and personal-wise. Sure. And two, do you have to do that meeting? Really? A lot of meetings I did, I just didn't have to do it. It was stupid. I just felt like, good, I'm working hard. I'm going to meetings.
I think that's probably going to resonate with a lot of us.
Yeah,
so thank you so much for the time today. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tony. Great to be with you and your listeners. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Reclamation Podcast. I know that you love this conversation with Brian as much as I did. Some of the things that really just absolutely stuck out to me is his passion for ministry, his sense of adventure, and the way he is attacking what it means to reach out to other men and grow ministry that intentionally includes men. I just love it. So there are lots of ways to connect with Brian. Obviously, his podcast, The Aggressive Life, his new series on Amazon Prime, and then please follow him on Instagram. It's such a good follow. He answers so many of our theological questions. As a reminder, don't forget, get out there and sign up for our email list. Get entered to win a book in our January giveaway. And we would love to give you Brian's new book, Move. All that'll be linked into the show notes. It's my dearest hope that you will continue to reclaim good practices for faith and life.